In our off-the-grid house, I think one of the most important aspects, because, well, all the other systems are part of it, is the design of our house. My parents designed and did the vast majority of the building of this house, and there's some things we really like and other things which, if we were to do it again, we would most certainly change. One aspect, which isn't the design of the house, is that when my parents were looking for land to build the house, they wanted to find a piece of land that was within walking distance of their work. This allows us to get by with one car as a family because they walk or bike or in the winter ski to their work, and my school was also nearby their work, which allowed me to do the same. The main aspect of our house that allows it to function so well is that it's small. The main heated space is only 2 floors that are 24 by 24 feet each. We also have additional cold spaces which are semi-insulated to keep them a little bit warmer than the outside in the winter, but can still easily get below freezing. These cold spaces provide additional storage space, and in the case of the fridge and freezer, a benefit, even though sometimes we do have to put hot water in our fridge in the winter to prevent it from freezing on particularly cold nights. Additionally, my parents designed the cold spaces to be on the western wall of the house because the prevailing winds are from the west, and in our particular location we get some really strong west winds. And so these cold spaces provide a buffer before the winds hit the house. Or at least we had really strong winds before the trees we've planted to the west of our house have grown up some and provide a nice windbreak, though the winds can still get rather intense in winter. A couple years after building our house, my parents added a porch right outside our entranceway. This really cooled the entranceway, which is also where we keep our fridge and freezer, and helped reduce the energy consumption on those during the summer. A couple years ago we got the porch screened and put plastic up around it in the winter. This also helps with some cold storage space that isn't insulated, so it gets really cold, but we've noticed that the room where the fridge and freezer are, which is also our entryway, really does keep the warmth a lot better in the winter since we've put the plastic around the porch, giving it like an extra buffer layer to the outside and eliminating more wind coming in. Though I said the main house is 2 floors of 24 by 24, we have a slight insert out of that area for a little overhang in my bedroom, so I have a little bit more space in what would be otherwise a very small and single window walled bedroom, and for our stairs because my parents just needed a little bit more space to fit everything in. An additional design is the low ceilings which we have in our house. This limits the amount of heat we have to put into our house because higher ceilings mean more area which need to be heated. Additionally, because heat rises, the highest areas will be the hottest, and in winter, if that area is above your head, it's just completely wasted heat, whereas if it's in an area you're using, it's not wasted heat and you get the benefit from it. Though our house would not be considered particularly well insulated now, when my parents were designing the house 25 years ago, our insulation was much higher than normal. The walls of our house are insulated with 6 inches of cellulose and at a diagonal to that 2 inches of fiberglass. The fiberglass is at a diagonal to limit the locations of thermal bridging, which is where wood is touching wood the entire way through the wall, because wood has a much lower R value than the insulation, which is why you use insulation. We also have a vapor barrier on the inside of our insulation. This also prevents wind from blowing in and out as much, in addition to the house wrap which is on our house. The reason this is on the inside of the insulation is we live in a northern climate where heating is predominant, and in the winter we don't want water condensing on the inside of it to go into the insulation because it will be colder on the outside of the vapor barrier than on the inside, and it will also be damper inside than outside. The insulation in our roof is flat, thus having an uninsulated attic above it, and this insulation is 14 inches of cellulose. Our foundation is also insulated. Though this is fairly common today, it was not at all common when my parents built the house. The front 2/3 of our foundation have 2 inches of foam around them. The reason the back third doesn't is because they were designing it so the back could potentially be used as a root cellar type thing, and we don't use it as this because there's a construction mistake on the part of the people pouring the foundation that resulted in a really nice root cellar. This lack of insulation on the back third of the foundation has really had some bad effects for us. That area gets pretty moldy, and we've had to give really quite a lot of airspace between the floor and the first stuff we have to prevent mold, and we also have to put various desiccants in there to try to remove water. If my parents were going to build a house again, they would most certainly insulate the entire foundation, possibly quite more than we have now. A couple of years ago, about 20 years after first installing the insulation, my parents rehired the cellulose blower and topped off the cellulose where it had settled a bit. Other additions include sealing up lots of places where there could potentially be leaks with spray foam and caulk, adding an additional 2 inches of insulation between one of our cold spaces and the inside of the house, particularly necessary because the original walls between the cold spaces and the inside of the house were not insulated as much as the inside-outside walls. My parents' thinking in that was that the cold spaces would be a bit warmer because they had a couple inches of insulation on them between them and the outside of the house. Though many years previously we've also added more insulation to the floor of the overhang that's in my room. Prior to that, that floor would always be chilly in the winter, and now it's just normal temperature. Another change that has probably taken the most work is replacing some of the windows in the house with much better windows than the original windows my parents used. Originally, my parents used some pretty cheap windows because they were young and didn't have a ton of money and were trying to build the house very cheaply. This resulted in some of our windows being more leaky than we would have liked. Because we're just installing new windows, the new windows aren't quite as big as the old ones, which is a slight disappointment, but it's really helping decrease leaks in our house. We also have a roll-down window shade in one of our big exposures to reduce heat loss out. We've also been putting plastic film on some of our windows, again to reduce heat loss, and we've just ordered some window inserts which will reduce radiant cooling through the windows. We don't have any sort of active air conditioning in this house. Instead, we do this partly by design but also by our actions. When my parents designed the house, they have designed it to have windows on both sides to allow for a lot of cross ventilation of air to allow for quick cooling. We open up these windows during the night during the summer when it is cooler outside than it is inside. In the morning, once it is warmed up outside, we close these. This allows our house to stay quite cool during the summer. Additionally, our house is sunk about 3 feet into the ground on 3 sides. This provides cooling during the summer and is less cold than the outside air during the winter. And it's single-digit days each summer where that system isn't sufficient for keeping the house cool. Though there are things we wish we could improve, such as installing more insulation, and other things which we are working on improving, such as adding new windows, and the house does require constant maintenance, as in any house, we are very happy with our house and it works quite well. If you have any questions about what I talked about in this video, please leave them in the comments and I will try to answer them as best as I can.